a couple of posts in order to build some category pages for WordPress within the Oxygen builders or others. And I've always come across some very complicated ways of achieving this, oftentimes by pulling in data from the post objects and so on. Some of the examples are stuff like this, where a custom field is added to a post type only to be pulled in and saved as a session variable, which in turn is pulled back in and added to an action before the posts are actually retrieved from the page. And while this may have its place, especially in some more difficult solutions where we need to combine multiple areas, there is ways of doing this, but I think there's others that are more appropriate, especially if you have a fairly straightforward categorization method. So let's take a look at a couple of examples. So categories are a type of taxonomy that are added by default to WordPress to the post type. And tags is also a taxonomy added to the post type. Example of tags could be, let's say, colors in an image, like, well, there's green, there's blue, there's yellow, there's red, and so on. There's singular, it's one-dimensional. But you could use categories as a taxonomy to maybe categorize where specifically something belongs to, like a group. For example, we have landscape, which could include, everything is a type of image, but there's landscape images, there's landscape images that deal with forest, desert, urban environment, there's portraits of an individual, portraits of a group, and so on. And the benefit here is that WordPress has this already built in. It gives you all of that, and it serves you all the content, in this case by default the posts, that already belong to these groups. So every content type and taxonomies are a type of content, much like a post. It's just used differently, is a content type. And by default, WordPress shows category with a base category and tags with a base of tags. Now, what does that mean? So, for example, if we have siteexample.com as a URL, then the base is category, and from our category taxonomy up here, landscapes would be the URL in which all landscape images that are filed or associated with the taxonomy item are to be seen here. You don't have to do anything else. Based on this URL, WordPress knows that it should bring up all the things, all the items that are associated with landscapes in this URL. And by default, WordPress includes a template, let's say in the 2020 theme or otherwise, that already knows how to handle all of this. The same thing goes for tags, but they have a different base. So everything that's blue. Now, as I said earlier, those tend to be one-dimensional. They can't be added to a hierarchy, or categories can be in a hierarchy. And you could even go a third level down or a fourth, and so on. So, well, how does this work with Oxygen? Well, with Oxygen, it disables the theme file layer, if you will. It doesn't disable themes per se. It disables how themes work from the files that you add to it. So the themes folder, and thereby by extension, anything that you would make changes in the normal file. So you have to create those. That's kind of what we're going into. So we can access all landscapes that are categorized or added to a taxonomy of category. This is the name of the taxonomy added to posts. All right, let's see, what does this look like? Let's kind of take a quick look at, we actually need to go and take a look at our permalinks. Looks like we have our post name as the common permalink structure setting, and our category base and tag base are both empty. So by default, we have is, as you remember, word category and the word tags as the base. So let's take a look at some sample posts. We have a bunch of posts in here. Some are associated with the category of business and one with everything. So let's take a quick look at these categories. Everything is also known as uncategorized. I just renamed it by going in here. Business is another one I added. And then we have the image types. There's a landscape, there's portrait. These have no post items, and these have 3 and 4. So if we click on the view of business items, then we get to see here are our posts that are categorized as business. These are only the business ones. And here are the ones that are in the category of everything. And you can see they look identical, but their content is different. It's the exact same template. However, they're applied in different manners, and we can then change this. Now, how do we do this? The best way of doing this, and here we go to the Oxygen templates. So I have set up an all taxonomies template, and I should probably name this more like this. Update this. And without going into too much detail, the biggest thing to know here is that I selected taxonomies and then all taxonomies where this template applies to, nothing else. Didn't have to select any specific ones. I just said this applies to all taxonomies. Now, there is a caveat to this, but I go into that into a bit, and you'll see why. The caveat is only if you want to change or if the content does not have the same information inside, right? So let's take a look. Obviously, what we had here is everything, and the posts and everything don't have a featured image, so they get this box. In business, well, some of them have a featured image. They get this box or this content. And again, we had 4 posts in category of everything, and we had 3 posts in the category of business, right? So what does this look like? Well, let's take a quick look. This is, in this case, very easily constructed without much care, but to just illustrate this point. You only need one template for all your taxonomies, and then you can further refine that. So let's take a quick look. So this is the category called business, and if I select up here, because I have all taxonomies, it lists everything I have. Then I can use everything. And I could use, for example, let's see where we have it. Do we have, don't have the other ones because they're empty, which is the other part. You can't style something where there's no content. The image categories of image types, landscape, and portrait, child items to the image type are empty, so there's nothing here. And all I did here is, and I can remove this section. There's no data for this either. This is the archive description. I can actually remove this. So we'll do this. And what I'm saying here is we have a heading that is the archive title, and this guy's called category everything. And then I have a very simple, easy post with a query set to default. There's no custom query required. Why? Because of our structure is already given to us by WordPress. It's a built-in feature. So we have a category, we have everything, or we have category and everything. So how do we get to all this stuff? Well, WordPress Codex is your best help. And the template hierarchy and the theme handbook and theme basics is a very important piece. And there's a visual overview that is kind of gives a lot away. So we have a bunch of stuff that we can see. Well, we have archive pages, we have all this. So let's kind of go to the right. There's an index page, an index.php file that's generally required in a template. And you set this up in Oxygen as well. You often call it main, etc. I would recommend that you call it index, not main. If you follow this particular naming convention, then it's much easier to further develop your skills, even if you come across a non-Oxygen or builder of any other sort site. It helps you out in the long run when you know what you're talking about. Because if you're only talking about very specific Oxygen terminology, then only people familiar with that particular terminology will know. So if you can call it main, and as I said earlier, add something, maybe index. That's your main, right? It includes a lot. Then there's a singular that we oftentimes skip. The singular basically composes, singular template is both a page template and the single post, like the post type that we get. What does that look like? So let's take a quick look. This is the archive, but this here is our singular post, right? So that would be this piece right here. We're concerned with one of the archives, well, category archive specifically, but we want something in here. So here is our category.php and then taxonomy. And as you can see, this breaks further and further into smaller areas. For example, we have a taxonomy hyphen taxonomy.php, which could be the template just for, let's say, the everything posts. Well, how do we do this? Well, let's do it. We post here. This applies to everything, so let's get out. And actually, let's save this and then get back out. And let's go back to our templates. So what we need, we have an all taxonomies. And so now I have a post categories template as well. I just duplicated the all taxonomies. And if we edit this, all we have to do is to tell it, well, yes, I wanted to apply to taxonomies. And I don't want it to apply to all categories. I know that if I post something in everything, I will never have a featured image, for example, or that the background should be red instead of blue, depending on your design, whatever you work on. So we'll set this, taxonomies and everything, and we'll give it a higher template priority. If it's 0, then they're fighting for each other. Basically, both are equally important. But I need to say that if the category, the taxonomy, is everything, I want this one to take precedence. So I give it a 5. Why do I do 5? So if I mess up somewhere, I can put a 2 in between. It literally just means a higher number. You can go by tens, you can go by hundreds. Obviously, to make it manageable, I do it by 5s. And then if everything needs to be added in between, I don't necessarily have to rename everything in between. Click on update. Let's take a quick look at what this looks like. And here we still have this older section. So let's do this. And we still have some of that. In this case, all I did was remove the image section from the template in PHP. In this case, I didn't do anything else. I think I'll left that guy again. Alrighty. And so let's set the background color to just a very light gray, just so we know that there's a difference visually. We can already see that by the images, but let's do this. So it's saved. Let's go back. Right, so what does this look like? This is our category business. reload this, and we can see category business. There's an image. Let's reload our category for everything, and you can see there's a different background image, and we have no image. So those are, yet I did not include anything in the template itself that would determine or pull any type of taxonomy into it. I didn't have to specify anything within the query. Why? Because the query is already given to us by WordPress. Hope that makes sense. So let's go a little step further, because this is really kind of useless, especially when we're talking articles and SEO and other things. What I'd like to know, what I'd like to have, is that this is an article in the category or taxonomy of business. So I'd like to have it look like this. How do we get there? Well, we're back in our permalink settings. And the first thing we have to do is remove the category base. And you could do that with PHP, and there's a few other things, and you could write a filter. Simple solution is to just add a dot. We do need to add the category to our example of the post name, so that we can utilize, so that we let WordPress know what we need. We need something from a category, a specific type, and we need the post name. Oh, we don't need the editor. So now we have a category of everything that no longer reads category / everything, but just everything. And if we then click on a link in this, the post name is added to the end. So we have now site example.local, everything, the new old Mustang. Or everything, news about car industry. So you can see if this was, for example, for a press release, you could have the / press. Now, instead of building all sorts of complicated ways, all you have to do, and I say this in air quotes, is to make a menu that allows you to access this. And there's a couple of ways of doing this. And let's go back to our business section to the same way. We get business and how to organize. And you can see everything else is pretty much the same. Here's our featured image. And here is an in-content image. So if I edit the post, that's the in-content image, and we had a featured image set here. And we'll go back to view post, we'll get the same URL structure. So this is a menu called categories, and there's really easy ways of doing this and really complicated. This is what WordPress uses as a sidebar by default. Remember, we have this particular piece right here that tells us that we have category taxonomies and other things, and it already has helpers built in. So let's go to our visual builder. And we'll go to, we have to go back to our single, save this. We have to go back to our post template, single. This would be the same as this template right here. Where is it? There we go. If we edit this guy. So this doesn't apply to an archive, but singular, and singular would be all post types. And here we just say this applies to posts. It doesn't apply to pages or media. And you can see these are all different types of post types, including some custom post types. But for posts, so if we edit this, we have our content. We can choose from our post types. We don't have a featured image here, but let's see. We don't have one here. But there's one. Okay. But here we have our menu. And in this case, it's really easy. It is generally the sidebar that's called categories. And it's I just stuff that into a little columns section so that sticks to the side. And this is a WordPress widget that already exists as categories. The caveat to this is it's only visible if there is something in those categories. So let's say the image type category that we started that had landscape and portrait in it aren't shown because there are no posts associated with it. So you could use that as part of a menu system, but it always comes back with categories. Or you could do something in a code block, and I would not do this here. I would do this elsewhere. And this is a very crude example. Sometimes it doesn't style properly. Is to bring up, in this case, I chose a naming convention for the taxonomy called vehicles. So you can see I can bring up, it does not let me, I don't know why this is here. But it's a very crude method of just bringing up a taxonomy called vehicles. Now, where do you find this kind of stuff and how can you use it? Well, your best source, again, is the WordPress code reference for the get taxonomies, even with some full examples and then other use cases provided by the community. So I highly suggest you kind of go through this. And that way you can technically create a dynamic menu item. I'm going to save this for now. This is our single post type, so we'll save this. And we'll look back at our post. Look at this guy. So here is our taxonomy called vehicles. I just added this in front. And because it's a taxonomy that has a hierarchy, the parent also shows up. And the way I wrote it is very rudimentary, but you can sort these and, for example, only take the parent or don't display the children, or do both. But you can see that you can build a menu system with it. Requires some coding. You can do this by hand as well. So, for example, if you only have 5 categories, it doesn't make much sense to write code unless your client needs to add categories or taxonomies. So the same thing applies to custom post types and custom registered taxonomies. And one good source to kind of get the code for these things and put maybe in a site-specific plugin. The first one, which most people are familiar with, is the Add Edit Taxonomies from CPT UI. The second one is there are some great resources for post type and taxonomy generators that produce code for you. So all you need to fill out these forms, put that in. And there is a difference to some of these taxonomies. For example, if we added one, and you saw I had one earlier called vehicles. Vehicles only applies to a post type called cars, but we have, let's see, where is it? The hierarchy set to true. Otherwise, it becomes a linear structure, more like tags. So that's the big differentiator, and there's some more nuances to that. For true being a hierarchy or false being non-hierarchy and therefore sort of linear versus a two-dimensional set. And the tags that we saw up here, this is where the hierarchy is non-existent, and the categories is a taxonomy where the hierarchy is existent. So you can build in the Oxygen builder. Let's get back out here, the front end. So post categories. We can say this is a taxonomy, and you could then, for example, say, well, here's my taxonomy called vehicles, and I renamed them terribly because I have a parent item in a taxonomy item that's called all vehicles, but it already has something that says all vehicles, which means everything that is listed in the taxonomy named vehicles. And that's how you can make different templates if you needed to. But for example, if you're displaying a product and the only thing that changes in these products is its content, you only need one template. I say this again. If you only have products where the look of the products or images or whatever you're displaying in the post type doesn't change, you only need one template for all of your content. I hope that makes sense. Your questions, let me know.